Hello, it's John Heaton, and today we chose a suitable setting to review George Harrison's Troppo album. So we're not in the tropics, but we're down at Lake Balaton in Hungary. Beautiful summer's day, and it's a very uplifting summer album from George for the most part. And it's not my favourite of his, but I think it's got some very strong highlights. Most of which have been forgotten over the years. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little introduction. So this is the album we're reviewing, and I called it a summary album, but actually it actually got released on the 4th of November 1982. So it's not the first time that's happened where an album feels summary from George and was released in the winter, because the same happened with George Harrison. This is a very wacky cover, and the title "Gone Troppo" is like "gone to lunch" crossed out, and then Troppo here, which is not that obvious to see if you're just looking at it casually. Cover designed by the way, that picture of George I think dates back to '74. I don't think it's a current picture. And then the whole cover designed by Legs Larry Smith, formerly of the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. And I'm not altogether sure who's on this picture on the back with George. I think it's the musicians who play on the album. But kind of a wacky cover, and nice summery colours and stuff. Musicians on this album, for a change, we don't have Willie Weeks or Klaus Voormann for the most part. We have a new rhythm section, Henry Spinetti on drums and Herbie Flowers on bass, and they do a pretty good job. Mike Moran is on keyboards, and possibly overdoes it a bit on the keyboards. Just trying to find my notes here. Yeah, possibly overdoes it. Ray Cooper's helping with the production along with Phil McDonald, and yeah, I have to say that this album doesn't open very strongly, because the lead-off track, "Wake Up My Love," was the single and didn't go anywhere, but it's kind of in-your-face 80s production, desperately trying to be a hit. I guess in the same way as "Got My Mind Set on You" was 5 years later, but at least that was a hit, and it was a better song. Just not very characteristic song you'd expect from George, and it's not my favourite at all. You really have to be in the mood even to listen to this one and not skip it. This morning I quite enjoyed it. Yesterday morning it was. But production is way too 80s, and not off to a good start. Then the album really recovers strongly with the next track, "That's the Way It Goes," which is probably in my top 10 or 12 George tracks of his entire solo career. I think it's brilliant. By the way, Dave Costello says of this album, "Thin 80s production, but George in relaxed good humour mode, which no one can begrudge. Very out of step with post-punk scene at the time of release, with very little interest and very little press release either." George himself lost interest for 5 years after this. So yeah, he didn't promote this album at all. No interviews, not even in the newspapers, let alone radio or TV shows, nothing. In contrast to Cloud 9 5 years later, where he really did heavily promote it. Made 3 videos and was all over the TV and radio. This one, I think he'd lost interest a bit in the music, or certainly in the commercial side of the music business. Promoting a record to him was a fairly dull affair. He'd rather be in his garden at Henley, attending to his plants and shrubs. So that's the way it goes. It was very nice to see this done at the Concert for George in 2002, with Joe Brown doing a brilliant version, with, I think it was Andy Fairweather Lowe doing the nice guitar solos. Yeah, that was a highlight of Concert for George for me, because it was a brave and relatively unknown track to do, whereas everyone else chose the safe ones. This track introduces the bass vocals of Willie Green, which feature on this album here and there, and very effective, particularly on the line "He can stoop so low." Nice words here throughout the song about money grabbing people and shallow people and stuff like that. And then we get a cover song, the next one, "I Really Love You," which is just so fun. And again, this one features Willie Green more prominently on bass vocals, and to great effect, because he just does a superb job. And talk about uplifting songs. The best thing about this album, I will say, is George's humour is evident, not throughout it, but on this album more so than on any other solo album I can think of. Kind of, Monty Python-ish humour, happy-go-lucky, carefree, not taking himself too seriously. And this track is very evident of that kind of feeling, and light-hearted, optimistic, brilliant. Then we get the instrumental "Grease," which is a kind of keyboard-driven number. Maybe a few too many keyboards, but some nice guitar work from George, and some nice, amusing kind of sort of lyrics in the middle about Monty Pythagoras and like Acropolis and stuff like that. Ulysses, Greece, excellent. I'm going to give this album a mark at the end, but so far I would give the single "Woke Up My Love" no more than a 6 out of 10, and I'd give 10 to the next two, and then 8 to the instrumental "Grease." Gone Troppo I would give a 9 to. I think this actually could have been a good novelty single if George had done a kind of wacky video of him in Hawaii, because it's very atmospheric words all the way through, really. "Plant me into Heliconia, no thank meeting the peoples. Wake me, eat the papaya, much hot, not much on the body." And then the last verse, "Quite like you ain't seen a sunset. Could be living in Rain Hill. Sun hot, you don't get a backache. Brown skin and very appealing. Come the Budapest Plains." So yeah, Gone Troppo, great track, very catchy chorus. Joe and Vicky Brown on backing vocals. Actually, Jim Keltner does help out on percussion on this track, although Henry Spinetti does the main drums. So you get the "How to Make Cement" here on one side of the inner sleeve, and then the lyrics with the sun. As I say, very summery album, all in feeling all the way through. It's on the iconic Dark Horse label, and this is the last we would see from George till 1987, which is a shame. So that closes side one very strongly. So far side one is absolutely top drawer, apart from the opening track. And then we move to side two, and it opens with just a sublime George ballad. I think this is the best track on the album, I really do. Some nice mandolin played by Joe Brown, some lovely bass playing from Herbie Flowers, and just a great tune and some great words, and very heartfelt. And the CD reissue features a lovely demo of this track, with just George at home with Olivia, just putting it down on acoustic guitar, apparently written on a rainy day. And just makes one regret that George didn't do an unplugged concert at some stage in his career, because George just solo on acoustic on this number on the demo is just stunning, and also makes one slightly regret the production on this album, which is a little bit 80s and heavy-handed on the synths. Not on every track, it has to be said. Next track is Unknown Delight, which is another in a long sequence of lovely George ballads, which have appeared on his albums over the years, like Dark Sweet Lady and Someplace Else. Your Love Is Forever, that kind of thing. Lovely verse. Maybe the verse is a bit stronger than the chorus. And actually, Willie Weeks does play bass on this track. You're going to have to do a lot of editing here, mate. And then next up is Baby Don't Run Away, which is the first kind of semi-dub track on the album. Kind of meandering, half-tune, weak lyrics. It's not terrible. Billy Preston is on backing vocals, desperately trying to give it some gravitas. It's just uninspired and it goes on too long, and just one wishes George had left this on the cutting room floor or studio floor, or maybe put it out as a B-side or something. Dream Away is a recovery, of course, the track from Time Bandits. This is pretty much top drawer George. I mean, it's brilliant, especially the verses. The chorus is okay, maybe a little bit repetitive, and the song goes on a bit too long. And it's the one thing that stops it becoming a George classic is there's no trademark guitar solo. But maybe by this stage in his career, George was a bit tired of doing the trademark guitar solo, because it doesn't really appear anywhere on this album. It appears here and there in his great guitar, and that's the way it goes. And it's a nice chord guitar on Mystical One, and I forgot to mention there's a slight solo on Unknown Delight where he mimics the solo of something, but it's really not much to write home about. So no real guitar solos on the album. Could have done with one on Dream Away, I think, but having said that, very escapist lyrics, very suitable for the film Time Bandits, and I'm very happy with this track. I really enjoyed listening to this whole album actually in the last week in the car. Really flows together much better than Summer in England, for various reasons. The main reason being this album was recorded in more or less one set of recording sessions, whereas Summer in England was a mismatch of 2 or 3, as you see if you watch my video on that album. Then the album finishes with Circles, which is allegedly a Beatles reject from the White Album period, but if so, you can see why it was rejected, because it really is nothing as a song. It's probably the worst track on the album. Dave Costello says it would have made the most morose Beatles song had it appeared. But I don't think George even got as far as presenting it to John and Paul, and if he did, I can kind of imagine their reaction, because it really is not up there with, if it was of the White Album time, it's not a patch on the 4 tracks which appeared on the White Album, and it's not as good as Not Guilty, which was also rejected from those sessions. It's not terrible, but kind of quite meaningful lyrics, but pretty cheap rhymes and just uninspired. So disappointing end to the album, really. But I totted up my marks on all of the tracks, and there's 3 10s, 2 9s, 2 8s, 2 6s, and a 5. So it comes to about 81. So 8 out of 10. If I'm in a good mood, it might get up to 8.5, because when this album is strong, it is really strong. I mean, Mystical One, and That's the Way It Goes, are 2 of my favourite tracks of his entire career, and Gone Troppo, I've really enjoyed listening to that track in the last few days. So this album really hangs together well. I think mainly because it was recorded. I've just repeated myself. So this album hangs together well, and it's very summery. So if you need uplifting in the summer, which we're in the middle of here now, then the 2 George albums you should go to are George Harrison, and this one, Gone Troppo. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.